the NCAA lifted the restrictor plates. We can monetize our NIL, and very quickly it became a recruiting weapon because everything in college football is recruiting. Everything in college sports is recruiting. And so some places were more aggressive than others. Tennessee, Oregon, Texas A&M, I guess Florida, a bunch of schools, and I say schools, the collectives that are loosely associated with the schools, very aggressive, some more aggressive than others. The ones that were most aggressive were the places that probably weren't already winning, but felt like they had the resources to win. And there weren't a lot of guidelines early on. And so schools were like, hey, we're gonna shoot first, ask questions later. And now some of that aggression, the NCAA is trying to push back on some of the guidelines that they later put in. And so, yeah, I think there's a wink to all of this. The idea that offering kids 6-7 digit contracts is not inducement. There was a wink to this, okay? And now the NCAA wants to enforce a lot of these things, and the schools are saying no. The collectives, the schools, the states are saying, this is not going to stand. You are not going to punish us. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that we didn't see Florida State mobilize first because they actually were penalized, and we haven't heard much from them since then.
Well, that was a negotiated resolution, too.
That's what I think is odd.
They didn't fight it. So in the Tennessee case, you wrote a story about Spire Sports a couple of years ago about how NIL was helping in recruiting. And then our colleague Stuart Mandel wrote a story about how a prospect had signed an $8 million-ish contract with a collective, didn't name the player. Everybody kind of knew who the player was. And now it's out there.
Arch Manning, right?
And now it's out there that it was Nico, the quarterback who went to Tennessee, who signed with Tennessee 10 days after
committed 10 days after and signed.
Committed after he signed the NIL deal. And so that was very much out there. And now the NCAA is starting to crack down on the ones that were out there and were very public. Jaden Rashada, the other one that just started a couple of weeks ago. So this lawsuit comes up. So the NCAA is investigating Tennessee. We don't know all the specifics. Our colleagues at the New York Times said it involved an airplane ride. But Tennessee here, the state of Tennessee and the state of Virginia are just attacking the concept of the rules in general. This is not a lawsuit that is saying the NCAA needs to be torn down, replaced, they should be employees, yada, yada, yada. They're just saying boosters should be able to pay recruits.
And I think this is a nice segue, guys, because the entire concept of the word inducement and the rules that were put in place in regards to the introduction and the rollout of NIL and how they were able to be employed are pretty unenforceable. Like when you think about it, and it's like something that we talked about even 2 years ago.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time.
Like, how do you possibly prove what a person decides in the comfort of their own decision making? How is offering a deal any different than somebody saying, here's what you will make when you arrive? Everything is an inducement. Like coming to your school, recruiting in general is an inducement. So this is, we're in a situation right now where you saw teams, and we had Doug Lesmerises on the show here a few weeks ago, and he thought it was a really good analogy I wanted to share if you didn't hear that episode. But all the college football programs were kind of driving on the highway of NIL, right? Some teams were going the speed limit. Some teams were going a little bit over the speed limit in that grace period, and some were going 80 miles an hour. The teams that were going 80 miles an hour now are starting to get pulled over. But when they're pulled over now, we're starting to wonder whether or not the NCAA's speed limit was just and really in American law in terms of whether or not you're able to make as much money as you can, both on your name, image, and likeness, and your income potential are also called into question. And, the thing that and I don't want to go down this path completely today, but it is unbelievable to me, if you start going down the rabbit hole of what you are allowed to do or what you're permitted to do to earn money, the types of rules that the NCAA could be attacked next. Like when it comes to eligibility limits, like what if somebody is making good money in NIL after 4 years or 5 years of eligibility, and they want to go work at Allstate Insurance? Like Talia could have, that could have been the springboard to that. So I think what we're really in the midst of isn't so much a Tennessee discussion or even a rules discussion. It's about whether or not the rules that are set in place are even something that we can navigate as a entity as we move forward into the new world where money and inducements and contracts and all the things that come into play as a recruiting tool, what it means for these players, how much they can earn. Like, can you even enforce any of this stuff? And if you can't enforce any of this stuff, what is the NCAA going to look like? And what are the rules going to look like?
This ties into the lawsuit from a couple weeks back about the transfers. They argued, a number of state attorney generals, that now includes Tennessee and Virginia and the Department of Justice, argued that the limits on 1-year transfers is limiting a player's earning potential if they have to sit out if they transfer multiple times. Resulted, they got the temporary restraining order, became a preliminary injunction that at the moment, there's no limit on the number of transfers you can do. There are certain limits. You can't transfer between two teams in the same season and stuff like that, but you can't limit going to multiple schools. This is arguing basically the same thing, that you can't limit the possibility of somebody making money. So they referenced it in this lawsuit. They referenced the transfer one as well, because anything that involves potentially impacting the earning ability of players is going to be challenged.
Which is basically every NCAA law. And I think it's also worth, like, we saw a lot of big, powerful people get involved today. Obviously, the Tennessee AG filed the lawsuit. We've already seen a supportive statement from Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. It's worth noting that public opinion has swayed so far that this is a winning issue in the public. This is a winning issue for Republicans because this is a free market issue. This is a winning issue for Democrats because this is a workers' rights issue. And it is an election year. And I think you're going to see when Danny White or when Spire or whoever picks up the phone and calls a politician and say, hey, can we get some help? Can we get your backing? They're answering that call and they're saying yes, because this is a very popular issue. And so you're going to see this in other states, because whether you're red, whether you're blue in a state, whether you however high up you are in that state legislature, as a senator, as a governor, whoever, people, if you are carrying the flag and saying we are fighting for our right to be able to use our resources to get the best players we can, people are going to rally behind that. And so you're going to see more and more states and powerful people get on board with this, because it's a winning issue for literally everyone in politics. And I think you saw a piece of that today in Tennessee, and it's going to spread throughout the country.
We knew this was coming for 2 years. As soon as these things went into place, we knew at some point the NCAA was going to start looking into somebody for paying a player for getting them to come to their school, not school, a collective for coming to the school, and it was going to get challenged in court. And now we're at that point.
And I think it's important to make this clear, guys. And I don't know if everybody listening to this is aware, but Tennessee is pushing back at the notion that they should be facing any regulation or penalty because the governing body is penalizing a entity that isn't officially
that's part of this too.
Officially
third party,
a part of the Tennessee football program. But there's a lot of wiggle room here in terms of who was at play here, who was signing the checks, where the money came from, when the money was dispersed, and whether or not anybody officially a part of the Tennessee football program is even behind this to begin with. And if you start trying to get
this stuff doesn't even matter right now. I mean, the lawsuit is asking for a preliminary or a temporary restraining order by February 6th, within a week. So within a week, we will have a decision on whether or not you can
do anything.
Do athletes with NIL. There will be basically no limits on NIL and whatever you want to do with it with prospects. So we're going to do that pretty quickly. Whether or not Tennessee.
But Chris, I think the point here is that there's no way to enforce this already anyway. So regardless of what the no limit thing is already in existence.
But then it's officially
but we've already pushed that point though, because if the thing here is that if you officially say it's Wild Wild West, anybody can go do whatever they want and pay whatever they want whenever they want, that's fine. But that's already kind of happening.
And now there's no one saying that you should. There's no one saying.
So this is important for that standpoint though, because. Now they're removing the speed limit sign. It doesn't mean that people were driving the speed limit, and whether or not you can actually give somebody a ticket that they pay is that question here. And I think that's pretty important.
Here's my problem with Tennessee. So on June 30th, 2021, when NIL becomes legal everywhere, Tennessee put out a guidance like every other school did. And on this webpage that I have open, it says the following is prohibited under the NCAA's interim policy. Among that, NIL compensation contingent upon enrollment at a particular school. They knew you couldn't induce players to come to school. And they're trying to use the contract says he doesn't have to pick Tennessee, so therefore he didn't. I don't think the NCAA is stupid enough to believe that. And that's why.
Well, but you got to prove it in
it's about
court.
proving.
The whole
proving it in court of law and believing it. Nobody believes it.
The NCAA enforcement process is not a court of law. Now we're in a court of law. But what's at contention in this lawsuit is not this particular contract. It's the idea of the rules in general. They're not going to court arguing that this contract keeps Tennessee safe from NCAA rules. They're saying the rules don't matter.